Hello, everyone. Welcome to Their Journey, a sit down with the National Digest. I'm your host, Eric Mastrota, and today I have the pleasure of once again speaking with Joan Gillman. If you haven't already, I highly recommend watching our first two episodes with Joan before embarking on this one, where we're going to dive even deeper into her teaching methods, along with some viewer submitted questions as well. For those who don't know, Joan is an established educator who utilizes interdisciplinary learning in the classroom, where lessons aren't just about putting pen to paper, but instead are emphasized by really getting involved through hands-on methods where students are engulfing themselves in their new material. So without further ado, hello, Joan. How are you doing today?
I am doing great and so happy to be here for another session with you.
Yes, and we're so happy to have you. And, in our past two episodes and the article we did with you, we've talked a lot about the successes of the methods that you utilize in the classroom. And in my opinion, I do think one of the greatest successes that we've highlighted is how engaged, motivated, and even entertained your students are when they're learning something new. So, along those same lines, we're actually going to start with a viewer submitted question from Sylvia from Georgia, who asks, how do you maintain a sense of natural curiosity and wonder in your students, especially in a world where standardized testing often prioritizes memorization over creativity?
Excellent question. My school has been moving to using the NGSS standards, that's the next generation science standards. And the way we get students really interested in the topic is by showing a phenomenon.
Mm.
It could be perhaps a thunderstorm or a tornado footage. It could be even something showing the Flintstones going to the Grand Canyon, which looks like just a little brook, and saying, well, in a million years, it's going to look much more spectacular. Just something to tie into the kids' curiosity. Even though I know standardized testing does take a lot of priorities, there are ways to make it really come alive, the information that they're required to know. And
Mm.
you can make it come alive in your classroom. For example, if the students are going to have questions on potential and kinetic energy, I set up a rocket demonstration in my class. And it doesn't take expensive materials at all. I take a one of those quart size or gallon size, actually, a good size um, Ziploc bag. I can show you. I have one right here. And what I do is I attach to the top a straw.
Mm.
Through the straw, I thread a string, and I have one student on one side holding it, another on the other. On the side that is open, I put a balloon
Mm.
that's not been blown up. So I go over, we blow up the balloon, and right now we're developing all that potential energy. And when we let go, the with that straw there and the string through it, it's going to go across the classroom, traveling, and there's your kinetic energy.
Mm.
Wonderful demonstration with materials that are not expensive, but really gets the topic understandable for the students and gets them ready for the standardized test.
Amazing. Yeah. And in all your years of teaching, you've obviously experienced students with a wide variety of different personalities and learning styles. So, along those lines, what strategies do you use to create an inclusive and supportive classroom environment that meets the individual needs of every student?
Well, I like to think of my classroom as a community of learners. We are there to help one another and to help each other achieve our goals. When we have students working on a project, I always like to make sure that everyone is contributing positively to the project.
Mm.
Each student will come with specific strengths, and they can use those strengths to actually help their group achieve their goals. Someone might be a wonderful artist, someone might be future architect and they can build things terrifically. We have another one who could be a master of putting together slideshows or other demonstrations.
Mm.
What I love to see is everyone is contributing, and it's going to result in a project there where everyone feels good about themselves, not like they've been left out and everyone else has done the work.
Nice, amazing. Yeah, and speaking of that sort of methodology, we have another question from a retired teacher, Mr. Evans, who asks, in terms of your experience, how has your teaching methodology evolved over the past 40 years, and what changes have you found have had the most significant impact on your students?
Oh my goodness. When I first began teaching in the South Bronx, I had a blackboard and chalk.
Mhm.
I was using those black line masters. My fingers always smelled from that. And, what did I know from technology? And then a number of years later, lo and behold, someone puts a computer in my room and I'm like searching, well, how do you turn it on? Nowadays, you can't think about being without the technology. All of our classrooms have smart boards.
Right.
And what I love about it, and again, for inclusive education, if we are writing notes and the students are recording the information, I'll put one fact in one color, the
Mm.
next fact in another, the third fact in another color, fourth fact in a fourth color. That way, students who have difficulty with tracking are able to see where one fact begins and ends and the next one begins. And
Yeah.
it enables them to have a much more success in recording the information. We also have classrooms with Chromebooks.
Mm.
So if there's a student who's needs a call for the use of a Chromebook to take notes, it's right there for them to be able to use it. And I really like that as well. Another thing with technology, if we're learning about perhaps a certain animal and the students says, well, what does it look like? Google Images. Well, how does it move? YouTube
Yeah.
or National Geographic Society or some animal website. It's, I mean, I cannot believe how much this information is right at our fingertips, but it does enhance uh, the learning of the students. We also use different online platforms.
Mm.
With the very young elementary students, we use Seesaw. And
Mm.
what's kind of nice about Seesaw is I'm forever taking photographs of my students' projects. I can post it right on Seesaw, write a whole description of what we've been covering in the class so the parents know exactly what to ask their children, like, what are you doing in school? I don't know.
Right.
Here you have the photographic evidence right there. For Google Classroom, we use that for grades 3, 4, and 5. Becomes a little more sophisticated. I'm posting the classwork, homework right on there. So heaven forbid a student is out sick or misses a class, there's the work. They can right away email me with questions. So it helps keep them abreast of what's going on. For those students who might need the information repeated, it's right there on Google Classroom. They can review it. So it becomes much more a tool in a good way. For older kids from sixth grade through high school, we use Canvas, a much more sophisticated online platform as well. It's a lot to keep track of, all these different online platforms, but each one is really age appropriate. One of the things we worry about is AI.
Hmm.
It's still kind of in its infancy, but we want it to enhance the learning experience and not take away from the students developing their own thinking skills. The last thing we want is a student using AI to write their term paper or their project. I mean, that requires absolutely no thinking at all, and that would not be good at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
You know,
other things I guess I can add on if that's all right.
yeah.
Uh, I find that a big change when I first began teaching, besides the technology, mostly here's the book, here's a workbook, answer the questions. I don't teach like that at all. I like to make my curriculum much more interdisciplinary. So I'm tying all the different subjects together so they can see the connection. Things are not being learned in isolation. It's kind of gathered all together. And really, it's kind of the way the world works, that way. And love being able to also do hands-on projects, lab work, not just read about it, answer questions, but actually pour the liquids, take measurements. It makes the learning really come alive.
Yeah, and speaking on this sort of like evolution as you've grown throughout your career, you yourself have taken advantage of continuing to learn as an educator yourself and expanded your knowledge and methodologies through many different avenues. So I'm curious what professional development opportunities or certifications have been most valuable to you. And kind of a part two to that is how can newer teachers prioritize their own growth as an educator?
I'm trying very much as an educator to develop students who are going to be lifelong learners. And what better way than there is than to model it yourself?
Right.
So back in the fall of 2018, I underwent a three-part process to become a National Geographic certified educator. Uh, this was a lot of information involved. I had to develop an entire unit. I had papers to write, uh, lesson plans to develop, and at the end, needed to do a capstone video highlighting uh, the culmination of that unit.
Hmm.
And it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I had never done a capstone video before, but it wound up working out very well. I was highlighting a unit on oil spills.
Hmm.
And you can read about oil spills, watch videos, it's devastating, it's difficult to clean up, but not until the students actually take part in an oil spill cleanup simulation do they realize, oh my gosh, this is almost impossible to do.
Hmm.
So I set up the classroom, not with petroleum oil, don't worry. I use actually vegetable oil, but I coat seashells with vegetable oil to stand for sea life, feathers to stand for the birds and ducks. And finally, I have a container with sand that I pour and mix in the oil. And their job is to remove all of the oil from the shell, from the feather, and from the sand.
Hmm.
They're given a whole packet of materials with soaps and Dove, of course, strainers, screens, cotton balls, paper towels, water, you name it.
Hmm.
And they're divided into groups. And as a group, they have to come up with a strategy of how to remove all that oil from those uh, three pieces, the seashell, feather, and the sand. And they get started, and I have unbelievable pictures of facial expressions like, oh my gosh. This, but they have an immense good time doing it. They like the challenges. It really makes the learning come alive because when you talk about cleaning up an oil spill being extraordinarily challenging,
Yeah.
they've experienced it and they, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is difficult, especially the sand. I have about this much sand in a cup, and at the end is like about this much left. It's like,
Hmm.
but there's no oil. I said, there's almost no sand
Hmm.
left. But it's a great learning thing. Other uh, courses I've taken back in 2017, I was one of 12 teachers selected to take part in the Globe Weather Field Test Program in Colorado at their atmospheric place. And this was to me a dream come true.
Hmm.
I've always been interested in meteorology, and here is a course devoted to it. They were giving us materials to actually learn to use ourselves and then test it out on our middle school classes. Uh, and I really loved it. Everything was next generation science standard aligned, but the simulations were fabulous.
Hmm.
Part of my lesson when learning about weather is going and learning about the different layers of the atmosphere, going from troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, ionosphere, all the way up to the exosphere. And their first attempt at it, and this is what we were evaluating, it only showed what happens when it's a weather balloon starts going up in elevation, the temperature goes down, but it didn't go any further than that. And we made the recommendation, let's bring it up into the stratosphere and then to the start of the mesosphere.
Hmm.
And they actually incorporated our recommendations and put it in there. And oh my gosh, it was great. I mean, they didn't bother with the thermosphere. It's going to be too much to do. But the students like, oh my gosh, you're right. It does get colder as you go. But look what happens in the stratosphere. The temperature starts to get higher, it doesn't go down. So troposphere is getting colder, stratosphere is it's getting warmer again, mesosphere switches back, and it's great to see. We had another one where they manipulated air temperature, humidity, dew point at different layers of the atmosphere to see if they can make different types of precipitation form.
Mm.
Another one was on manipulating the size and wind speed of tornadoes to see the type of damage present.
Mm.
Um, all kinds of lessons that deal with weather. It was great, even tracking a hurricane. I mean, it was great materials. And that I actually still use today. Another one in the summer of 2022, I got a grant to do the Modern Classroom Project, become an educator through that. And this was an online course that enabled you to set up a self-paced classroom so you
Mm.
can really meet the needs of all students. So I'm using that information as well today. Really important, this professional development. I don't think any year goes by where I'm not taking class at the Museum of Natural History,
Mm.
or I go to the professional conferences from Stannis and STA, give workshops, and I take workshops, meet with educators. I'm forever updating my curriculum. I don't want it to be stale. And again, my students see this happening and they realize, oh, the teacher is a lifelong learner. Why can't I be one too?
Right. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Okay. Now I would like to transition us a little bit into some parental perspective questions. I loved how you were mentioning before about that platform Seesaw too for the parents to be involved too. So I want to start us with a question from Kimberly from Arizona who asks, how can me and other parents work with teachers to ensure our child's individual needs are met in the classroom?
Well, I feel communication is vital. You don't want to wait until that first parent conference in November to speak to your child's teacher. It's really important that um, the teacher is aware of your child's strengths and weaknesses, so they're better able to meet the needs of that child.
Like, yeah. And something that we always emphasize when I'm talking to you is about this creative side of the lessons you do. So we have a question from Viola from Colorado who asks, how can we as parents help our children balance academic responsibilities with that creative exploration and play?
Sometimes finding kids are overly scheduled with things going on after school. If it has to wait for the weekend, it's still worth doing it. I think it's great when parents head to the museums or the zoos or nature centers and walk through the exhibits, asking their child questions, finding out more, um, even going to the seashore, collecting what you find, different types of seashells and rocks, and then later on coming home to try to identify what you found. Um, Even though your schedule can be very, very busy, I still really recommend having that bonding time with your child. You can learn together. Even going to a lecture at the museum that's designed for younger children. It's
Mhm.
great.
Definitely. Definitely. And we keep touching on this idea of being a lifelong learner. So what advice would you give to parents to model lifelong learning for their children the way that you do for your students?
Okay, I would say the worst thing would be for your child to see you constantly on your cell phone
Mm.
and talking and not perhaps picking up a book and reading. Maybe you read a book together with your child and discuss it. Um, Planning a vacation together. Let's
Mm.
look at what state we're going, what is there to see, and actually learn about the history of the place, what scientific discoveries are there. It's something I think is so important. You don't want to just pluck the child in front of a computer or television and that's it. You'd rather have them picking up a book, doing research, spending some time at nature centers. I always love doing that. Or even having materials at home for your child to explore. I remember growing up, and my mother kind of gave me free rein in the bathroom when I was mixing different solutions and powders and seeing what kind of new discovery I could make. I'm thinking I'm going to save the world one day, but just having that opportunity and having those flies there. or even having perhaps collecting boxes. My brother and I used to make robots, and
Mm,
we cut out eyes for the top part and put in a flashlight so the eye it would look like the eyes are glowing at night. And
mm.
having the materials around just to explore is also an excellent idea.
Definitely, definitely. And everything we're speaking on is touching on different elements of this interdisciplinary learning methodology. So, next we have a question from Miss Clemens from Massachusetts who asked, how do you approach designing interdisciplinary units that balance multiple subjects without overwhelming the students? And can you share your process for integrating subjects like science, art, and math into a cohesive learning experience?
Usually, when I begin planning a unit, I start to say, okay, this is the topic. And then I try to figure out ways that we can incorporate history, math, science, art into the unit itself.
Mhm,
Um, I think about perhaps my lessons on astronomy.
mhm,
So I know the end result is going to be having the students build their and test their own rockets, but I don't want them just learning about rockets. I want them to learn a little bit about the history of NASA and
mhm,
how did we get there. So we're looking at the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and space shuttle programs, and now up to Artemis. And I usually begin with showing the students a picture of the original 7 Mercury astronauts.
mhm,
And I'm asking them, what's missing here? And then, oh, where are their astronauts? It's, no, that's not it. They're not wearing oxygen tanks. No, that's not it. It takes them a while to realize that there's absolutely no diversity,
mhm,
no women, no people with diversity, no African American, Asian, nothing. And we talked a little bit about the history of what requirements NASA insisted on in order for a person to become an astronaut.
mhm,
And they realized, oh, they had to be an officer in the Air Force. Well, in those days, only certain people were allowed to head for that position. So we talk a little bit about history that way.
mhm,
Um, we look into going into from the 50s until the 1980s. Did we suddenly have an astronaut corps that looked much more like what we have in the United States with diversity? It took a long time,
mhm,
took a much longer time, but we go through that history. We also talk about Katherine Johnson, this African American mathematician who was responsible for figuring out the math that would be necessary for to get John Glenn's rocket off into orbit and then to return at the exact um, angle.
mhm,
Because if she had mistaken the math, he could have come in too shallow and bounced right off the atmosphere, be lost in space, or come in too steep and burn up.
mhm.
So her math skills really enabled our whole astronaut program to continue. Um, when we going back to the astronomy, we also will watch Apollo 13.
Mm,
I love that movie. I've seen it a dozen times and can still watch it again. And I have the students pretend that they're a news reporter living during that mission, and they have to write a news article describing one part of that mission and disaster and the things that happened.
yeah.
And gives them right there. We got our writing skills. I actually teach them how to write a news article. Kids love that film. They always hear groans when I have to stop it because the period is over. But we have that. When we go into doing our store rocket unit, they're going to be working with variables using their measurement skills. They're going to have a straw that's between 10 and 20 centimeters, 2 to 5 fins, a clay nose cone that can't be more than 2 centimeters across. And they then go ahead and find the mass of the total rocket. And finally, they have to choose 3 launch angles.
Mm,
Everything is drawn in their lab notebook, so they're using the drawing skills. They get to name their rocket. They put in all the measurements on each part of the fin. And we go then outside on the sidewalk on the street, and we set a huge measuring tape right down the whole sidewalk, and the kids get to launch their rocket 3 times. Once they put down, again using measurement skills, they have to put down the distance the rocket flew. Once that's over, we head back inside, and now we're going to analyze the results. what length of rockets seemed to fly the furthest? Did we have rockets flying further that had a bigger mass or a smaller mass? How many fins seemed to be ideal? What type of angle worked the best? So based on this information, the students get to redesign their rockets, and then
Mm.
we go out again to test on another day. And
Yeah.
it's really great. They love it. It's something that the kids look forward to. The hardest thing is what I call the variable that must not be named, is
Mm.
the wind, because these are only weigh a few grams, and if there's any wind, it's not going to fly very well.
Yeah, and also speaking on these amazing projects that have creativity so deeply woven within them, we have a question from Mr. Davidson from Virginia who asks, in a system that often prioritizes standardized testing, how do you measure the success of your hands-on, curiosity-driven teaching methods, and what metrics or observations guide your assessment of your students' growth?
Well, in science, we're doing many investigations, and as part of that, there's going to be an area where they're going to have to use writing skills and show their knowledge. For example, they need to be able to formulate a question that they want to investigate. They then will need to write a hypothesis, and that's going to be based on prior knowledge. They can't just say, I think this is going to happen. Oh, wait, no, you have to then pull in your prior knowledge to explain why you think that's going to occur. They're going to need to write clear directions, step-by-step directions of how you're going to actually conduct the investigation. And they need to figure out their variables are control variables, independent and dependent variables. Once they do the experiment, they're then going to be collecting data, analyzing the results, and then writing a conclusion based on their findings. All of this comes into evaluating the students' learning.
Mm. Perfect. Yeah. And these
Oh,
projects also, oh,
yeah, if this was going to add, also in some cases, I'm going to prepare a rubric with certain criteria as well, and they'll be graded on that is another area to see.
yeah, no, of course. And, speaking of these projects too, there's definitely a balance that you have to create with the actual learning and the creative hands-on parts of it. So I'm curious how you strike that balance between providing structure in the classroom and allowing students that freedom to explore and experiment, especially with the hands-on projects. Like you mentioned, one of my favorites that we've talked about is the Elephant Challenge, and your other interdisciplinary units as well.
With the elephant challenge, we don't just tell the kids, here are materials, build a bridge, let's see if it'll stand up. They need to acquire prior knowledge. So we're going to be going through, well, I just want to stop for a second. Our phenomenon is the Tacona Narrows Bridge collapse, so that they realize even the best designers can fail as well. But we go through 6 different types of bridges. We do cable stay, cantilever, suspension, truss, arch, and beam bridges. They actually watch some videos on it. They are writing down the pros and cons of each one. They're actually sketching a picture of each bridge, showing where the stresses are in it. And once they have that knowledge, they're going to work in groups to decide on which of those 6 bridge types they want to build. Because we're going to have 4 elephants standing on top of it, and it needs to be able to hold all of the mass. And it's great to hear the conversations that the students are having. And they're using their prior knowledge. Oh, wait a minute. If there's too much wind, that might not be good. Or this has a lot of strength, but you can't have it a big distance. Just listening to their arguments with each other and deciding on it. It's not, you don't have to worry. Some schools are concerned about financing and having enough materials. What I always do is send a note home to parents and to the community to send in their recyclables, boxes, shoe boxes, string, ribbon, washed out milk cartons, soda cans, you name it. And the parents always come to the rescue. Sometimes I think they're just cleaning out their apartments. Because my room really looks like the Great American Recycle Center. But in terms of the school supply, I mean, duct tape, we'll have scissors, we'll have masking tape. I have paintbrushes and paint. Some of it I could sometimes get from the art teacher that's left over from the year before, but it's not a lot of expensive materials for it. And the kids will go ahead, they draw their drawing of how they want the bridge to look, and they start building. Again, they're going to have some failures, which is perfectly fine. They'll come in the next day, part of it's collapsed, part of it's standing up. They have to figure out where the weakness is, where the, and how to reinforce it so it's going to stay up. But it's great. Wonderful learning experience for the students.
Yeah, and next we have a great question from Sierra from North Carolina, who asked, in your work with students from diverse backgrounds, how do you ensure that their cultural heritage is not only acknowledged, but actively incorporated into the curriculum in a meaningful way?
Well, when we're learning about skyscrapers and bridges, we don't just look at what's in New York City or the United States. We're looking around the world in China, in Dubai, France, Italy. We get a chance for the students to see worldwide what's happening. And what is so heartwarming is seeing the kids. I know that building. My grandparents live next door, or I've been on that bridge. And you hear them just taking such pride in their heritage and
Mhm.
places they visited. I also see that happening during my lesson from astronomy when we're learning about how a star is born and the life cycle of a star. We then
Mhm.
head into constellations. And in most schools, what they usually do is just look at constellation tales from the Greeks. Those are the famous ones. I don't stop there. We look at ones from Native American cultures, the souths of England, China, Australia, Arabia, Egypt, Wales as well. And it's great to see the diversity right there. One of the interesting ones is looking at a song called The Drinking Gourd, and it talks about how the slaves would use that particular constellation. It's actually the Little Big Dipper. It'll point to Polaris. If you know how to use it correctly, it'll point to Polaris, which is the North Star, and that was the star that would guide the slaves to freedom.
Mhm.
So we actually add that right in there.
Amazing. And I want to end off with some reflective questions as well. We have a great one from Mrs. Roberts from Indiana who asked, can you share a time when one of your teaching methods or projects didn't go as planned? And what did you learn from that experience, and how did it shape your approach moving forward?
Oh, I've had a few of those. And I learned from it. We were actually learning about fungi, and we're focusing then on single-celled fungi yeast. And our project was to have six different flasks, each with a different combination of ingredients, and we put a balloon that was not inflated yet over the flask, and depending on what combination of ingredients, some of them will cause the balloon to inflate, others it would just kind of flop down. So we heated up water, poured it in the flask, and some had sugar and yeast, another had a lot more sugar and some yeast. One had yeast alone, one had yeast and salt, another had just sugar.
Hmm.
Uh, and we mixed it up and put it there, and we're waiting, and nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. And the kids are looking at me and said, "What's going on?" It's like, Turns out, Miss Gilman did the blooper here. I overheated the water. So when I put in the yeast in the water, it was too hot and it just destroyed it. So and Miss Gilman admitted, yep, I made a mistake. And we redid the experiment, made sure I had the thermometer to check the temperature, not estimate it, which
Hmm.
was a big mistake. And we did it a second time, and the second time it worked like a charm, and we had two balloons blowing up, and kids
Well,
were just thrilled. Another experiment had to do with our class making a water filter.
hmm.
So they had to decide between um, coarse sand, fine sand, gravel, silt, and clay, as well as some cotton balls. And we had we had dirty water set aside, and we put in a funnel, we had a coffee filter, some cotton, and then they put in their combination of ingredients. And I said, okay, we're ready, pour the water in. Big mistake. It
Hmm.
takes a while for the water to seep into the into the cup that the funnel is sitting on, and instead we had water all over the classroom. So it's like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. It's all right. Cleanup crew. Out come all the towels and the mop, and we cleaned it up and did it correctly the next time. It's something I tell my students the story before we start the water filter construction, and they kind of laugh at me, say, "Yeah, I made a mistake. I admit it."
Amazing. Yeah, finally to close this out, I kind of want to zoom out a bit on all of this. And we have a question from Eleanor from California who asks, how do you define the role of play in education? And how do you ensure that playful, hands-on activities remain purposeful and aligned with learning objectives?
This actually happened this year. We were working with learning about waves, sound waves, and I brought in some tuning forks, and I wanted to show how you can transfer. Once you hit the tuning fork, you can transfer it to water, and it will bubble around. And the kids were looking and saying, "Can we try this on other objects?" And
Mm,
suddenly they're going around the room. They're putting it on their zipper, on the metal by the faucet, on different objects to see which ones will actually cause it to sound.
mm,
And it became a great learning aspect because after about 15 minutes, we came back as a whole class. I said, "Oh, what did you discover?" I said, "Well, it didn't work just on plain cloth, but it worked on this." And it was just heartwarming to see. They were so excited. I gave them free rein to try it all over. In other times, I brought in with that lesson drums, ukuleles, and xylophones,
mm,
and have them discover how do you change the pitch? In other words, increase the frequency of the wave. How do you change the volume?
mm.
So they're actually testing it out on the different instruments and then writing, recording the information in their notebooks about what they discovered.
Oh, amazing. Well, Joan, I just got to thank you so much for once again taking the time to speak with me today and offering your advice, experience, and overall expertise on these really valuable subjects when it comes to teaching and molding future generations. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you once again for having me. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you this afternoon.
I appreciate it. And for those of you at home to learn more about Joan Gilman and her teaching methods, you can click the links in the description to watch our previous episodes, as well as read our article with her. And make sure to stay tuned for future episodes as well. Once again, I'm Eric Mastrota, and this has been Their Journey, a sit down with the National Digest. Take care, everybody.